Hey everyone, it's Hannah Saber from HI Images. In today's video, I'll be talking to you about the Samyang 35 1.4 Mark II lens, so stay tuned. Samyang has been putting out a lot of Mark II versions of the lenses, so updating the build quality as well as the focusing, even the image quality on these lenses. Now, like the other Mark IIs, the recent 85 Mark II, the 135, and you've got the 24 1.8, the under 50 1.4 Mark II, the 35 1.4 has the same build quality, same design structure as those lenses, which personally I do prefer this design look opposed to the older version, especially the fact that they're adding a focus hold button here, and you've got a mode switch, mode 1 and mode 2. Now, with the mode 1 and mode 2, you can customize it through a lens station. At this stage, I've actually customized it to mode 1 as manual focus, and mode 2, I can change it so the focus ring becomes an aperture ring. Now, some people have said the G Master is a better form of aperture ring, but in the G Master version, they have the D-click and click button. So if you're shooting photos and you want to know where your aperture is at, you have the D-click on. So as you're changing apertures, it clicks in. But when you're doing video, you tend to have that off because you don't want that clicking or that jerk motion happening in your lens while you're filming. So the Samyang 35, having that silent change of aperture is great for video opposed to photos. But in saying that, using this as an aperture ring for photos, I have not had any issues in terms of knocking it into different aperture or anything. But if you decide to find it annoying, you can always switch that back off when you're not using it. In terms of weight wise, it is a similar weight to the Mark I version, so they haven't sort of done a lighter version like what they did with the 85 1.4. But the main difference is owning the 1.4 Mark I did notice in extreme low light it did hunt it a little bit, whereas the Mark II, they have improved in that focusing. Now, someone had mentioned that they found that when turning the focus ring, they heard a grinding noise in their focus rings in a lot of the lenses, but I have not heard any of that. Just to kind of put this against the mic, I am turning it, you cannot hear any grinding. So it could be a bad copy that other person got, but if you are wondering and you are curious, there is no grinding noises in their focus rings in the 35 or any of the other lenses. Again, I'll put it up next to the mic. So I have not heard anything, and I'm putting it close to the mic so you guys can know yourself as well. Just going back into the focus, the Mark II version, the focus is actually really quick, very snappy, especially in extreme low light. I'm shooting a low light portrait workshop using this lens, just having an LED light, the Nanlite 5C, and using that light in the city. We've been in crowded and we are limited to where we can go. And just the focusing, being able to pick up on the model was just unbelievable. Comparing it to the Mark I did had hunting issues, not all the time, just sort of depending on the lighting situation, but I have not had this with shooting this portrait. Even at christenings, I put it to a test, using it at a real world event, shooting a christening at the church where there's low light, you cannot use the flash, being able to nail the focus, the eye autofocus for this works really well with this lens. Nailing the eyes, making it tack sharp. I decided to use it on my own dog, having my dog running around chasing bubbles. These are some shots captured with this lens, just showing you how quick the autofocus is catching onto my dog without any issues. Now, obviously having a lens, you want the autofocus to keep up with the focusing system that the Sony bodies have, and Samyang has done really well to be able to keep up with the Sony lenses and be able to capture these images. They've gotten a little bit closer, not a lot, a big difference, but in the Mark I version, it is 30 centimeters minimum focus distance, whereas this is 29 centimeters. So they've gone an extra 1 centimeter closer to the subject. To some people, that might not be a lot, and to others, it could be really good for them, especially if you're doing a lot of detail shots in, christenings, weddings. Here are some detail shots, for example, shot for Holy Communion, just being able to capture the shoes. and having that, getting that nice close focus and having that nice smooth blurry background. The bokeh and the background separation is very buttery, smooth. These are some sample images just showing you how smooth the background blur is. We're giving you that harsh, jaggedy sort of blob in the background or distracting background. Whereas I did find the Samyang 35 give that nice, smooth, soft bokeh and separation. Even at low light, just showing you again one of the shots with the model that I have captured. You can see how it gives a nice bokeh of lights in the background when I'm going close to my subject. With the 35 it actually handles the lens flare very well. Here I'm just shooting against the sun in the background at f8, giving a nice starburst effect, but having very minimal of sun flare, unlike some of the other lenses. But the sun flare just sort of depends on the characteristics you're trying to show, or if you want to try and go for more of an artistic approach, because a lot of people intend to add sun flare into their images through Photoshop. So having a bit of sun flare through the lens is not necessarily a bad thing, but just depends. Some people prefer it, some people do not. But the 35 1.4 Mark II has handled the sun flare very well. Here are a couple of shots that I've captured, just showing you that with is very minimal chromatic aberration. Shooting with this lens, I actually have not seen any chromatic aberration in this lens, so it handles it very well. Whereas the Mark I did notice some chromatic aberration, so they have improved a lot with the Mark II version in comparison to that. I do have a video that I've done earlier when the Mark I came out, just if you want to have a look through and see for yourself, comparing the difference in this with this lens. Shooting at f1.4, it is sharp in the center, but when you're looking at the corners, you can make out the detail in the corners, but it is slightly a little bit soft on the corners at 1.4. When you're shooting at f2.8, it gets sharper in the center, but also a bit more sharper in the corners. So with the 35 1.4, you do have a bit of slight softness in the corners, wide open in terms of the sharpness. With autofocus for video in low light, this lens performed really well. I've put it onto my Fiotech S-Corp gimbal, just following my cousin down the straight on her skateboard and just seeing how nice and quick the autofocus is, keep tracking against her. So I did have touch tracking on just to follow her, and as I was following her behind, the focusing kept up really well. I did not notice any jump or any delay in focus or hunt, especially in extreme low light. This was shot around, that video was shot around I think 20,000 ISO, if not more, but just because it was pitch dark, relying a lot in the f1.4 in a very high ISO. So it was around 20 or 40,000 ISO. I'll have to double check, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was around that mark. Even in normal daylight situations, here is a video of my dog, just to show you of her moving around and just watching how the focusing has kept up. I did have MKII AF for video as well, so as it catches her eyes, the little box will then intend to go on her eyes. This lens is not just good for portraits, but it is awesome for street photography. Here are some shots that I've captured doing some street photography, and being able to just sort of walk around, just having this lens. I've always loved the 35 1.4 lens, using it a lot in street photography scenarios. It has been one of my favorite focal lens, besides the 135 using it on street. So it either fluctuates between those two lenses, but just using it for street photography, being able to quickly focus on whatever subject you are trying to capture. Obviously in street, no one's going to sit there and wait for you like a model shooting portrait. Things are moving fast and you want to be quick to capture things that you see very interesting on the street. We were on the train and I was at the front of the train, handheld with this lens, using this to be able to capture some panning sort of kind of shots. So I've had a very slow shutter speed, handheld, capture the image, being able to capture this without any issues. I did switch it to manual focus, making sure everything is in focus, shooting around f8, but just being able to go around the streets, do different things with the 35 being a very good focal length, which I personally think for street photography, if you do not want to use a close-up prime lens like a 85 or a 135. That concludes a quick review on this lens. Hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you do have the Mark 1 and you aren't 100% happy with the focus, the Mark 2 is definitely worth the upgrade in terms of the focusing, especially video. With this lens as well, mentioning that the focusing is actually a lot quieter than the Mark 1 version, and you don't hear any motor noise in the continuous focusing for video. Do subscribe to my channel, hit the bell notification button. I will be planning to do a comparison video with the Samyang 35 1.4 and the G Master 35 1.4. I've been getting constant messages asking me to do that comparison because people would like to see the difference. So the video that I will be doing will be more of a comparison for you to be the judge. I will give my 2 cents on what I feel, but at the end of it, it'll be more ultimate, your decision on what you feel from what you can see. Until then, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you later. See ya.